Hello everyone and welcome to the lecture on bar plots. As usual, we start by importing the libraries and modules. Import NumPy, Pandas, Seaborn and Matplotlib's pipeline. We have the special magic function which will help us see our plots on Jupyter Notebook. Let's start by loading the tips dataset, and we'll save it in a variable called tips. We'll use Seaborn's load dataset method, then pass our tips dataset. Let's take two of the variables from our tips dataset and draw a bar plot. For that, we'll call Seaborn's bar plot method, sns.barplot, and we'll pass our x and y variables. For our x-axis, let's say day, and for our y-axis, let's use the tip data, and our data comes from the tips dataset. Run it. Now we have a bar plot with days on the x-axis and tip on the y-axis. So we see that we have the highest tip for Sunday. Let's see another example. Let's draw a bar plot of day versus total bill, for instance. So sns.barplot. For our x-axis, we'll use day, and for our y-axis, we'll use total bill. And the data comes from our tips dataset. So that's what it looks like for the day versus total bill. We can also pass the hue attribute to get more information based on that hue. For instance, let's pass 6 for our hue attribute. Okay, so let me copy this, paste it down here. This time let's pass a hue attribute and set it to be 6. Run it. So here we have our bar plots for days versus tip, divided by, or the hue is 6. We have male for male and for female in green. If we want to change the color, we can pass the palette attribute and set it to a different color. Let's say winter_r. Run it again. We have a different color now. And we can also pass some other hues like smoker. For instance, let's copy that, paste it here, and pass hue smoker. Run it. So now we have a bar plot for days versus total bill, and hue is smoker. Smoker in blue and non-smoker in green. So it looks like from our data set, you can say, for the days of Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday, we have smokers paying a higher total bill versus compared to non-smokers, and the opposite is true for Friday. So we can get some more information by including this hue. So these are vertical bar plots. We can also have horizontal bar plots. So if we change the position of x and y, we'll get a horizontal bar plot. Let's see an example of that. So sns.barplot. This time for our x-axis, we'll use the total bill, and for our y-axis, we'll use days. Y is equal to day, and our data comes from the tips dataset. Run it. Now we have a horizontal bar plot, and again we can pass the palette attribute and change the color to, let's say, spring. Run it. Now we have a different palette. Okay, another thing we can do is pass the order attribute and pass so that we can control the order in which the variables are presented. For instance, let's consider day versus tip for our bar plots. So SNS.bar plot, for our x-axis we'll pass day, and for our y-axis we'll pass tip, and our data comes from the tips dataset. So if we consider this alone, we have day and then tip on the y-axis. Let's change the palette to a different color. Let's make this one spring also. We have that. And if we want to see the days in a different order, we can pass the order attribute. So we can pass order and then pass a list of the days that we want to see in order. For instance, if I want to see Saturday first, I can write that. I can pass Saturday first in our list, and then let's see if I want to see Friday next. I'll say Friday, then Sunday, and finally I want to see Thursday, for instance. So if we run this, we have the days in the order we specified here: Saturday, Friday, Sunday, and Thursday. So in all of the examples we have seen so far, you see that on the y-axis we have mean of the tip, right? So if you go here, the amount here is in mean, the mean of total bill, mean of tip, and so on. Instead of mean, if we want to pass another estimator, we can also do that. For that, we'll need to pass an attribute known as estimator and set it to have a different value. For instance, if we want to use median as our estimator, we can pass median for our estimator attribute. Let's see an example. SNS.bar plot, and let's plot a bar plot of, let's say, day versus total bill. And data comes from the tips dataset for estimator. So without passing the estimator attribute, here we see that total bill is, we see the mean of total bill. Now let's pass the estimator attribute, estimator, and set it to be, let's say, median. If we run it now, it says median is not defined. Okay, let's import it from NumPy. From NumPy, import median. Okay, it should be good now. Let's run it again. Okay, now we have a median of the total bill instead of mean. Okay, and let's pass the palette attribute. Let's use spring. Looks like that. Similarly, we can consider other variables. Let's consider, for instance, smoker versus tip, or SNS.bar plot for our x-axis. Let's pass smoker. For our y-axis, let's pass tip, and our data comes from the tips dataset. So without the estimator attribute, it looks like this: mean of tip. Now let's pass the estimator attribute and set it to be the median. So if we run it now, we have the median of tip. We can still pass the hue attribute, for instance. Let's say sex, run it again. So we have sex as our hue, male and female, and the median of our tip. Let's pass a different palette and set it, for instance, to be cool warm. Run it again. So that's what it looks like. Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lecture we'll continue our discussion on bar plots. So in the previous lecture we looked at the estimator attribute and we can pass a different estimator to see that specific estimator information. In this case we passed median and we were able to see the median of the tip. So here in all the graphs that we have seen so far, you see that there are black lines. These black lines represent the error bars. So these are all error bars. Okay, and we can pass different confidence interval values for these error bars. For that we'll be using the CI attribute. For instance, let's look at this dataset, smoker versus tip. So SNS.bar plot. For our x-axis we'll use smoker, and for our y-axis we'll use tip, and data comes from the tips dataset. Let's run it. So we have smoker, yes and no. So mean of the tip. Now we'll pass different confidence interval value for the error bar. So CI, and then set it to a different value. For instance, let's say 99. Run it. That's what it looks like. Let me copy this and pass a different value for our CI. Let's pass, for instance, 68. Run it. So you see the difference in the error bars now, right? So those are different confidence interval CI values. Let me copy this again, paste it here and pass, let's say 34, and now we have a smaller error bar. So you can check the CI yourself. Again, you can use the palette attribute and pass, let's say, winter R. We have that. If you want to see a different estimator, you can pass the estimator attribute, and then let's use median, for instance. We can do that. Another thing we can do with the error bars is that we can add caps to each of our error bars. Let's see an example of that. SNS.bar plot. Let's consider different attributes, different variables for our x and y axis. Let's consider day versus total bill. For our y axis we'll use total bill, and data comes from the tips dataset. If we run this, we have day versus total bill. Let's use a different palette, spring, for instance. We have that, and then to add a cap for our error bars, we simply pass the cap size attribute and then set a value for the cap size. For instance, let's say 0.3. Run it. So here we have a cap size now. Now we have added a cap for our error bars. Its size is 0.3 in our example. Let me copy this, paste it here, and pass a different cap size value. For instance, let's pass 0.9 and see what it looks like. So the higher the cap size, the longer or the wider our cap is. Okay, let me copy this, paste it here, and pass a smaller cap size. For instance, 0.1. We have a smaller cap size. Palette, let's pass HUSL. Okay, so this is for our day versus total bill. We can still pass the hue attribute, for instance. So if I copy that, paste it here, and let's pass a hue attribute and set it to be, let's say, 6. Run it again. So we have our hue, male and female, for each of our days, and a cap is added for each of the error bars. Let's look at another example. Let's draw a bar plot of size versus tip. Let's say next a bar plot. So for our x-axis we'll use size, and for our y-axis we'll use tip, and our data comes from the tips dataset. So if we run this, we have size versus mean of the tip. Let's pass the palette attribute and pass a different palette. Let's say fall. Okay, there is no, fall is not a valid palette name. Let's pass, I think there's one called autumn. Let's run it again. Okay. Here we have autumn for our palette. Size versus tip. We can add caps for our errors, similar to what we did here by passing the cap size attribute. Let's do that. Cap size, let's set it to be 0.15. Run it again. We have that cap size, and similar to what we did before, we can use different palette. Let me copy this, paste it here, and let's pass, for instance, HUSL, and it looks like this. And if we only want a single color for all of our bar plots, we can pass the color attribute and then set the color that we want. For instance, if you want to see green for all of our bar plots, what we can do is, instead of the palette attribute, we'll pass the color attribute and set it to be, let's say, green, for instance. If we run this, now we see that all of the bar plots are green. Similarly, if you want some other color, let's say red, for all of your bar plots, you can do so by setting the color to red. Run it, and now we have red. And if you want to adjust how bright or how light the color is, you can pass another attribute known as saturation. Then you can set it to some value, let's say 0.3. Run it. So you have a different saturation of red. If you want, you can pass a higher value here, let's say 0.8. Now you have this shade of red. So you can play around with the saturation to get a color that you like the most. Great. This is what I have for the lecture on bar plots. Just to summarize, we looked at bar plots, how we can draw vertical bar plots. We also saw that we can have horizontal bar plots, and we can pass certain attributes to get more information on our bar plots. For instance, we can pass the hue attribute, we can pass the order attribute to see our bar plots in the order that we want, and we can change the estimator to some other estimator, for instance median, and we can adjust the color of our bar plots, and we can also control this error bars by passing different confidence interval values, and we saw that we could also add caps to our error bars. And finally, we looked at how we can make all of our bar plots the same color by passing the color attribute.